सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. It would have been nice to have the dialogue in Sanskrit, but my spoken Sanskrit is not so good. So I'm glad you asked me to talk in English. I'm very happy that the Vice Chancellor, Professor Srinivasa, is also here. Thank you very much, sir. My greatest dream is to have Sanskrit universities all over the world. But so I'm really glad that I'm here sitting and talking to you. Now the subject chosen, I think there is a question answer session after this, but I'll speak for a short while and then we can go there. Is that okay, Professor? Yes, okay. So, all right. So when you say Shri M, it actually, the M stands for one Madhukar Nath, which is the name given by my Guru Maheshwar Nath Ji when he introduced me into the Nath Sampradaya, one. But the most important M is from the first letter of the word Manushya. So I consider myself as just a Manushya, Hindi Manav, same thing. So the subject is Bhakti and Vedanta. As you said some time back, there is a general misconception, I think it's a misconception, that when you are a Vedantin, you cannot include Bhakti in it. I mean, Bhakti, people think so. In fact, some Bhaktas also have this misunderstanding, that when you say Vedanta, you are some kind of a dry intellectual. And I want to tell you something very interesting. Many years ago, the first time I visited the US, I was invited to a small gathering in Harvard, in their philosophy section. So I was supposed to speak on Vedanta. So I started on Vedanta, Upanishads and so on, defining what Vedanta is, Vedanta and so on. So suddenly one professor, American, not Indian, rarely do in India people ask me these things, these questions. He put up his hand and he said, when you say Vedanta, which Vedanta are you talking about? Because in Veda there is Advaita Vedanta, there is Vishishta Advaita of Ramanuja, there is Madhva's Dvaita Vedanta, then there is anyone between Nimbarka and Vallabhacharya. All this is Vedanta. So when you say Vedanta, can you specify which Vedanta you are talking about? You see this? So there is Vedanta, there is also Bhakti Vedanta. There is Vedanta in both. So let me first explain why we say this. The reason is Vedanta, of course, is the crux of the Vedic teachings. It is the essence of the Vedic teachings, and it's called Vedanta for two reasons, which you know. Since you are all Sanskrit people, you must be knowing. It comes at the end of the Samhita portions, of Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharva. Then there are the Brahmanas. Then there is the Aranyakas. And then Aranyakas smoothly merge into the Upanishad. So since it comes at the end, it's called Veda Anta. That is one reason. The second reason, I think, is when someone really has an anubhava of Vedanta, then all learning comes to an end. There is no more learning there possible, because everything is understood. What has to be understood has been understood. Therefore, Veda Anta also happens. Veda is to study, you know that, to read. Now, having said that, I'll go into it in a slightly different angle now. Even though Gaudapada wrote the Karikas of the Mandukya Upanishad and so on, the most important teacher of Advaita Vedanta, that too, not Dvaita Vedanta or Vishishta Advaita, the founder of the Advaita, not founder, the expositor of the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, the best, which is the most important, the one we know of, before that there must have been, but we don't know much, was Adi Shankara. Adi Shankara Bhagavad Pad. Now, this great person, who by the time he was in the 13 years old had finished reading all the Vedas and understood, and he lived only 33 years in this world. 31 or 33, I am not sure, something like that. Okay. So, in this period, it's an extraordinary thing that he is like a child prodigy, because he has written commentaries on the 11 principal Upanishads. He has written commentaries on Vyasa's Vedanta Sutras, the Brahma Sutras. He has written commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, the first commentary on the Bhagavad Gita available to us in Sanskrit is Shankaracharya's, Shankar Bhagavad Pad. There must have been others before, because he keeps complaining sometimes, saying so and so said like this in somewhere, but that is not correct. So I am coming to this. So there must be, but we don't know as far as we know. And then all these wonderful texts like Viveka Chudamani and so on. Right. So if you look at the commentators and the great teachers of Advaita Vedanta, Shankara Bhagavad Pada is par excellence. I mean, you cannot go anything more than that. I don't see, at least we don't know. Such a person, now there is a controversy whether this is another Shankara or the same, it doesn't matter. I think these controversies always are there. So let's skip the controversy. It's the same probably Adi Shankara, and in Kerala it is accepted that he is the author of this particular hymn. And since he came from Payyanur in Kerala, I think it should be right. I don't know, maybe. So it's the same Shankara who writes the commentary on the Brahma Sutra, which starts with Atato Brahma Jijnasa, and it is so abstract. One of my kundalis fell off. So when he starts that, the same Shankara finally said, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate. And, oh fool, sing the name of Govinda. And that it is clear that it must be the same person, because the next, Samprapte Sannihite Kale Nahi Rakshati Dukrana Karane. So there is no chance of escape with all your grammatical constructions, which he is famous for. An arguments and discussion. Having said that, he says, man, fool, chant the name of Govinda. Right. One, I am just trying to see how Shankara looked at bhakti. Then this same Shankara, probably, Bhagavad Pad, also is reputed to have written, and in many cases, in many arguments and many discussions, it has been proved also, it is the same one who wrote the Saundarya Lahari. Now, Saundarya Lahari, that is Govinda, whose abode is not very far from Madanapalli, where I live, 3.5 hours. And this is, Saundarya Lahari is on the Devi, on the Sri Vidya, Rajarajeshwari, Tripura Sundari, and the descriptions that he has given, starting with Shiva Shaktya Yukto Yadi, Bhavati Shaktaha Prabhavitam, Nachedevam Devo Nakhalu Kushalaha Spandittum Abhi, Atastvam Aradhyam, who am I to worship you? So, this Saundarya Lahari is also written by Shankara. So, if there is a dichotomy between what we called the intellectual Vedanta, pure Vedanta, and Bhakti, then Shankara Bhagavad Pad could not have done both. And if he could have done both, which other authority shall we look at? There is nobody I can look at. Okay. Now coming down to little further up to contemporary times, not contemporary times, just before, the great author of Pibare Ramarasa, do you know his name? Sadashivendra Saraswati was a great Vedantin, no question. Not only was he a great Vedantin, he was also a great yogi. One of the greatest expositions which bridges the gap between yoga and Vedanta is the wonderful book written by Sadashiva Brahmendra, Yoga Sudhakara, which is today available. Yoga Sudhakara. Today it's even available in English and other languages. Sringeri Mutt and Kanchi are doing a good job publishing it. So, and he is the one who sang Pibore Ramarasa. Right? So, when you, and then come back again to little more closer to us, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Right. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa started as a bhakta. Then he went, Totapuri initiated him to Vedanta. There was no dichotomy between the two. Even though Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa started his life, his sadhana, I think he was born gifted, but even then he did a lot of sadhana, probably to show people that you can approach in different ways. So when he started, when he had his first vision of Kali, the mother, he didn't see the mother, he saw light. Light which was drowning his identity totally. In fact, he was very worried before the image of mother came and said, we'll stay on normal. So, there is no dichotomy there also. Okay, then we come to the supreme Vedantist of modern times, Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was the closest disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He didn't believe much in singing songs and kirtan, even though he sang beautifully. He was a great Drupad singer. So, if his Vedantic understanding has come from this bhakta of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, I don't see any dichotomy between the two. You see, and in fact, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa once said to Swamiji, he said, Naren, you think you are a jnani and I am a bhakta. It's actually the reverse. I am the jnani and you are the bhakta. So, which means that without that element of inner understanding, by which there is a spontaneous arising of devotion, there cannot be any progress in the spiritual field, however much you know Vedanta. See, now let's come to the Bhagavad Gita. There are 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. 18 adhyayas are there. And the 18 adhyayas purport to teach you the essence of Vedanta. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. Now, of the 18 adhyayas, starting with Arjuna's sorrow, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, it goes on and on and on till bhakti is not mentioned anywhere till then, except then when you come to the Dwadasho Adhyaya, to the 12th chapter. When you come to the 12th chapter, it's called Bhakti Yoga, right? So, why is it that Vyasa or whoever wrote it mentioned bhakti only in the 12th chapter? Why can't, see, bhakti is very important, we agree. Why can't we start it from the first? Or why should we wait till, now according to Bhagavad, it is the essence of all spiritual discipline, according to Srimad Bhagavatam. So why wait till the 12th chapter for bhakti? Now, I was studying this with my Guru Maheshwarnath Babaji, and he said, have you thought about this? I said, Babaji, no. Can you tell me, because I don't know anything. So he said, okay. He said, what is the chapter before 11th? What is the chapter before that? 10th. Up to the 9th chapter, it's a regular dialogue. Krishna is sitting here and Arjuna is speaking to him. It's a normal dialogue, regular dialogue. And he's saying, okay, you tell me, okay, I'm listening. So I don't agree with you. Everything is going on. Somebody says, let your mind be like the flame where the wind does not touch it. And Arjuna says, just a minute, I cannot do that. My mind, you know how it goes. So, all this is going on because he considers himself as his friend or as his charioteer, also related. So, they are at almost equal terms. Then comes the 10th chapter. Suddenly Krishna changes his record and says, it's like olden days we had this discs, he changed and put it on the other side and he says, among the mountains I am Meru, among the Achalas I am the Himachala, among the Vedas I am Samaveda, among Munis I am Kapila. And for a second Arjuna is wondering, what is this happening now? He was just now talking to me till now, just like you and me talking. Suddenly he turns around and says, among the mountains I am Meru. What is this happening here? Who is this man? It's only there that Arjuna begins to wonder if it is systematic approach of talking and having a dialogue with a friend is beginning to change. Okay. And what is the next chapter? Vishvarupa Darshana. Mahima is over. Vishvarupa Darshana. Suddenly Arjuna sees that this man who was putting his hands around his shoulders and walking and who was driving his chariot has changed and there is nothing to be seen which he saw before. Everything is completely become universal and global. So what has happened there? If Maheshwarnath Babaji had not pointed it, I would never have discovered this. What has happened that Arjuna's so-called logic, ordinary logic based on the Indriyas, sense organs, has been totally demolished. After it has been totally demolished, then only bhakti can start. As long as you think that Supreme Being is a commodity which can be achieved through this, bhakti cannot exist. It has to be our complete so-called logical thing. So what we call logic, which is very limited, which is based on our indriyas, panchendriyas. We have no other data. That is demolished. Then I go into another section. Some people call it intuition, I call it bhakti. Then I say, I don't know anything, I surrender before you, please teach me what I should know. That is of the heart, not of the brain. So, while a preparatory study is essential, the study begins to become anubhava only when the heart opens up, which is bhakti. I am not saying that you should worship, daily worship, which is good for most people, but there are many kinds of bhakti according to the Bhakti Sutras. There are many Narada Bhakti. There are many kinds of bhakti. One is the ordinary bhakti where I say, oh God, give me a promotion. Oh God, I am unmarried, make me married. I don't think of what will happen afterwards, but anyway. So, and so on and so forth. But then, and in ashrams, people keep saying, oh God, make me the head of the Mahant and so on. Anyway, this is ordinary bhakti. Now, now the other one is, oh God, give me knowledge. Yeah, God, give me knowledge. That is one kind of bhakti. Then there is a bhakti where you are in intimate kind of terms with treating the divinity as your own child. Or, it is so difficult to think of divinity as an abstract formula. Even when you think of abstract formula as in Vedanta, there is still the pranava which is existing. It's not totally off. Even the most orthodox, the sannyasins have to chant the pranava. Now pranava is a sound, it has a form. Every sound has a nama, rupa. So that is one kind of bhakti, give me knowledge. then the intimate connection with the Supreme Being. You cannot have an intimate connection on an abstract thing. It is very difficult. Probably the Sufis had some connection like that, but it is not so easy. So, in India, we have this great advantage. We have God manifested in so many forms. So many forms. So, when you relate like a mother to a child, or Vatsalya Bhava, in the Bhava literature there is so much about Bhakti, and so on. Then there is the last one, which is Madhura Bhava, which Sri Ramakrishna practiced at the end of his life. Now, once you have reached that, then you are not in any way different from the highest goal of Vedanta, according to me. Why? You know, it's one thing to say the world is an illusion and the Supreme Brahman is the only reality. Okay, agreed. Suppose we agree, Jagat Mithya, but we live in this Jagat. As long as we are conscious through the Panchendriyas of this Jagat, you cannot dismiss it as Mithya. Yeah, from the higher sense, of course, it is Mithya. We can. So then, we have to find out some connection through the Supreme Being, through this world which we live in. So, the joys and sorrows of this world are part of everybody's life. Nobody is free of sorrow. Little bit joy also is there, I am not denying that. So the Parabhakti or the highest of bhakti is when, like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, you know, Kunti's prayer. I am not saying we can all become Kuntis, it is dangerous. We will say that and then when disaster comes, we run for our lives. God save me from this. Krishna is going on to Dwaraka after the war and he says, I am going, ask me for a boon. And Kunti says, yeah, this is the boon I want to ask. What is the boon? Bring all the sorrows of the world on my head. And first she says, don't try this drama, I know who you are. But since you asked for a boon, I am asking you, bring all the sorrows of the world, miseries on my head. Even Krishna is taken aback. Why? Because then I will call you. Every sorrow comes, I will call you. And I know that you will appear, there is no question. So all the time you will be appearing. What more do I want? Now this is Parabhakti, where the devotee is not important, the Lord only is important. Now, this, according to the Gita, cannot be achieved simply by, it is nice to have Nama Sankirtanam, it is nice to indulge the mind in emotional spiritual activities, it's good to do japa, it's good, all that is understood. But when Arjuna asks Krishna, can you define the qualities of a bhakta? Krishna says only three things. One, Samniyam Indriya Gramam, one who has the control of his Indriyas in his hand. For Vedanta also it is required. To study Vedanta also and to study yoga also it is required. Then, Sarvatra Samabuddhaya, where the mind can be tranquil under all circumstances. Tulya Ninda Stutir Mauni. And last, Sarva Bhuta Hite Rata, one who considers the welfare of all living beings in his heart, says Krishna, whatever be his mode of worship, that's not important. If these attributes are there, I consider that person as a great bhakta or a yogi, whatever you want to call it. So according to me, bhakti, a bhakta and a Vedantin are only, as you said in the beginning, two sides of the same coin. Some have little more of this, some have little more of this, but ideal is a good balance, which is not so easy, I understand. So this is what I say. So therefore, it is about time for us to have a discussion, I suppose. So some questions may be there. So some people would say that, but then will God appear if I call and so on? Question often asked. Now you have this very well-known bhajan, you know, Achyudam Keshavam Krishna Damodaram, Rama Narayanam Janaki Vallabham. कौन कहता है भगवान आते नहीं, मीरा के जैसा बुलाते नहीं थे. So with this I stop. Now we can deal with some questions. And let me tell you, I don't know if I can answer this question because haven't heard the questions. And if I don't have the answers, I will plainly tell you I don't know. So we can start.
So thank you very much, Swamiji, because it is to the point, actually not deviating from the crux of the topic.
Sir, you gave me the topic.
But actually, as you said, Swamiji, the conflict is very clear here. That on one side you have the dry Vedanta, as people say, but actually you are living Vedanta. So therefore, you don't find you find Vedanta dry. But people often think that Vedanta deals with the intellectual part and the Bhakti deals with the emotional part. So
I know.
people always find a conflict between these two. And
Yeah.
of course, this Narayana Tirtha and many other like Madhusudan Saraswati
Right.
to give answers.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. I know.
The major problem, yeah, somebody asked you that which Vedanta you belong to. So this is actually a ridiculous question because all Vedanta, they have one single base, that is Brahma experience.
Yes.
I remember Swamiji in the Shankara Bhashya only somewhere he says, Anubhavavasaneva Vidyaya Bhakti. So
Right.
ultimately, the culminating point of all knowledge is
Is
experience.
Anubhava.
So unless it is
Yes.
unless it is experienced, it doesn't carry
Yeah.
any value at all. They say.
Exactly.
My simple
So,
question, Swamiji, simple question. That since you have gone through all these traditions, you have met the legendaries in spiritual life, and you have rich experiences everywhere, and especially the Natha tradition, the richest tradition, and I firmly believe in that. So, the simple question is, in Natha philosophy, we have a good balance between Bhakti and Vedanta, but in
yes.
Kriya Yoga of Babaji or Lahiri Mahashay,
Yes.
actually, I would like to know from you personally what Babaji, Lahiri Mahashay, or Yukteswara Swami. So, what do they say about the role of Bhakti in Vedanta or Vedanta in Bhakti?
Huh. Now the question is, I'm not so much connected to Yukteswar Maharaj and Yogananda Paramahamsa, even though I'm connected to Sri Guru Babaji through Maheshwarnath, my Guru. So, but the tradition we follow, the practice which we follow, the Abhyasa part is Kriya. Agreed. But I also have a Srividya streak because Babaji also initiated me into that through somebody else. But anyway, so Nath Sampradaya. Now you know, the Naths, nowadays it's difficult to find Naths because when you say Nath, it actually means one who has touched the Supreme and therefore has become a Nath. Nath means what? What is a Nath? Head.
Not in Sanskrit, generally, master.
Master. It means master. Nath is master. Natha. So master. So Natha is master. So therefore, it means simply a definition of the word, one who is master of his senses, which is also the meaning of Goswami, and one who is also a master, has found the inner experience of the truth, which is, according to the Natha Sampradaya, Alak Niranjan. Alak means that which cannot be expressed in any way, and Niranjan
Alakshan,
is that Alakshan. So that is actually the Brahman. Now, the importance of the Nath Sampradaya is very simple, which is if the Naths like Gorakhnath and Mashendranath and even Jnaneshwar, who is a Nath in Alandi, if these personalities were not there, many of the yogic texts might have been lost. Because the later day Vedantins thought that it is not necessary to practice yoga. You can simply by saying Neti, Neti, or then reach finally Aham Brahmasmi, you can reach, but you can only keep saying it. You cannot reach it unless the mind is mind is trained to become quiet. Now that is yoga, which is why in the last part of the Gita always it is mentioned, while the Gita is an Upanishad, it is also in Yoga Shastra, Yoga Shastre. Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. So, yoga. So, the Naths saved the yoga from being lost, because the roots of yoga lie from Sweta Ashvatara Upanishad onwards, Prasna Upanishad, in the Kathopanishad, in the Mundaka Upanishad. Shurasya Dhara is actually working on the path of yoga. Now, they saved. So therefore it is important. Apart from that, there are Naths who are Bhaktas and Naths who are Vedantins and Naths who are Sankhya Yogins. In Sankhya there is not even a concept of Ishvara out there. So there is only a concept of Purusha. Now you ask me about Kriya Yoga. Now, in Kriya Yoga, Kriya is basically only one form of the practice of yoga, but passed on, particular techniques passed on to us from Sri Guru Babaji onwards. But Kriya Yoga is, Kriya simply means technique. In fact, if you must have read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, nowhere in the Yoga Sutras Patanjali himself says Ashtanga Yoga, although there are 8 angas. In the Sadhana Pada, Ashtangani, but not as Ashtanga Yoga. As these 8 angas are the part of yoga. That's what. But when he begins the Sadhana Pada, which is the practice, he calls it Kriya Yoga. Have you seen that? Yes. So Kriya Yoga, there are many kriyas in this yogic science. Many kriyas. Out of that, it's a rich literature. Out of that, particular kriyas, when I say, it is that which has been taught to us by Sri Guru Babaji, who is also known as Mahavatar Babaji. In the Yogananda Paramahamsa tradition, yes. Yogananda Paramahamsa was the first person who called him Mahavatar Babaji. Before that, we don't know any Mahavatar Babaji. We know only Sri Guru Babaji. Exactly. He authorized it and made it into Mahavatar, because he said many avatars have come and gone, but here is someone who is there for a long time, forever almost. So therefore it is the same source.
Exactly.
So Kriya Yoga is not different from yoga. It is one of the kriyas, one of the techniques of yoga is Kriya Yoga.
Yeah, that's why in the Yoga Sutra also, Swamiji, in the commentary he says, Kriya Yoga means Kriyaiva Yoga.
Yeah, exactly.
Kriyaiva Yoga.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I am working on a translation on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I have the last Kaivalya Pada to finish. I have done 17 sutras. I have to look more. So when it comes, we'll see what happens.
Wonderful.
Yes, sir. Tell me.
If we get the fortune, so we will be ready to publish if I get permission from our Vice Chancellor, sir. So
sure.
we can publish it, Swami. We'll see.
Okay. It's a sloka by sloka, sutra by sutra, word by word translation.
And since you belong to the Natha tradition, Swamiji, I remember one OV from the Jnaneshwara. So he said, Kriya Kiran Sai. Sorry? So he said,
Absolutely.
One reality. Yeah. There is one reality, that is the Brahman. So there cannot be any other entity, but still Bhakti is there. So this accommodating Bhakti in the Kevala Vedanta, not in other Vedantas. Vedanta of Shankaracharya seems to be somewhat because one being there, how can it be the Bhakti which requires 2 entities? So
I will tell you why. Because as long as you discover that in true experience, you still are in duality. And the only way to approach that, to link that duality, is through attaching yourself to the higher. When you reach there, you can say, only this exists. Till then, it is difficult to say. And Jnaneshwar himself, uh, uh, Sant Jnaneshwar, was a Nathpanthi actually. His Gehninath and what I forgot. They were his gurus, Guru Parampara. And Nivartinath was Gehninath's disciple. So this is the link. So therefore they were Naths. But Jnaneshwar himself was a great Bhakta. See, so all I am saying is that there is no dichotomy between the two, and I think the heart is as important as the intellectual mind. Intellectual mind, ordinary intellectual mind, I am not talking about the higher intellect, ordinary buddhi is dependent on the five senses, indriyas. Whatever data is collected by the five senses, that is processed and made into intellect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if there is something beyond the five senses, then it cannot touch it.
True.
So I am saying when that happens, all great people who have experienced it have understood that it is more to do with feeling and anubhava. Even anubhava means feeling mostly, not so much as a discovery. It's more to do with the heart than with an intellectual analysis. While I fully agree that intellectual analysis is necessary, especially in the modern world, because people want to say why, what, how. That is very much there in Vedanta. You don't have to search anywhere else. It's right there. And if you must have read the Karikas of Shankara on the various Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras, it's out of this world. You can't offer something to Shankara and say, this is it. He'll say, wait a minute. Why?
Yes, yeah. You put to severe examination, critical examination. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very nice. May I request our Vice Chancellor, sir,
Yes.
to just express his views?
Sure, sir.
Salutations to
Namaskar.
Sant Madhukaranath Swamiji.
Namaskar.
I have a small question.
Please.
You allow me to.
Please.
The simple question is that the Advaita, as by name itself, signifies that it is identity. So the person feels himself identical with something, and the bhakti devotion demands for duality. Bhakti demands for duality. So because if I don't feel that I am loyal to someone, I am dasa to someone, how can I do bhakti? Therefore, how do you reconcile this identity, bhakti and advaita? That is my very simple, small question.
Sure. Now, we discussed Saundarya Lahiri some time back when you were talk.
Yes.
Yes. Now, when we discuss Saundarya Lahiri, now Shankara Bhagavad is the great commentator on Brahma Sutras, Upanishads, also Saundarya Lahiri. Now, in Saundarya Lahiri, the same Shankara who says Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, and there is only one Brahman, there is nothing else exists, no duality, starts one of the slokas of the Saundarya Lahiri by saying Bhavani Tvam Dase Mahi Vitara Drishtim Sakarunam. So how did it come? So all I am saying is that when you are conscious in this world, when you are conscious of this world, then there is always some duality. Little bit of duality will remain. When you merge there, it is not there. It's not a dichotomy actually. So that is very important to note because I give you an example. Ramana Maharshi, who did not have any touch with Bhakti Yoga or anything of that kind. That's what people think. He only said the self is found, it is over. But when people read out the beautiful hymns on Shiva, he used to shed profuse tears and his chest used to become red. Now, what is this happening out there? So, as long as you are conscious in this world, while you are mostly, let's say I am 99% there, only that. However, I still have 1% where I eat, drink, go around, move, talk to people. Not me, I am saying anybody. A yogi, let's say. Till that exists, till the body dies, there is still some duality. And when there is duality, bhakti is a very good approach. Because that keeps us anchored. Yeah. So that's one thing. Then there is also the fact that, once I was having a discussion with, unfortunately, may his soul rest in peace, he passed away recently, Visheshwara Tirtha Swamiji of the Pejawar Mutt.
Udupi.
Yeah, they are totally Madhvites, total duality. So my wife is from Udupi, so my wife's house is Udupi. So in those days I used to go there, and in the morning I used to go to the temple for darshan. And as soon as I go and come out, if it is his pariyaya, then Swamiji will be there. He will meet me just outside the temple when when did you come? So come. So we go to the mutt and we have had several discussions. He will not admit, of course, but he liked me. We had several discussions. So one day I told him, Swamiji, okay, Krishna is there. Oh, I am there. Okay, agreed. That he agreed. Okay, you are there, Krishna. Now I say I am so absorbed in Krishna that I have forgotten my existence. Now there are two or one. First he said one, then he said, no, there are two. So, you know what I mean? It starts with duality and ends in non-duality.
True. In the tradition of this Maharashtra Madhuradvaita also,
Yes, yes.
Aharya Dvaita,
Yes.
they say so that is a kind of artificial duality that only for the sake of bhakti they
You are talking about Nimbarka.
temporary.
Yeah, that's right.
No,
So,
Advaita of this Jnaneshwar Maharaj.
Oh, Gyaneshwar Maharaj, right. So that is true, but it is necessary at that point. Because without that, it may become just intellectual discussions and so on. So I think it is very, very essential to have the fragrance of bhakti going through the great Brahma Sutras also. You know that you have read all these. You are Sanskrit. You are the VC of the Sanskrit Vidyalaya and so on. So what I am saying is, if you look at the definition of the Supreme Brahman in Brahma Sutras of Vyasa's Vedanta Sutras, where in other parts of Vedanta the Supreme Being has been described as Satchidananda. In the Vedanta Sutras of Vyasa, generally the Brahman is expressed as Asti Bhadi Priya. Asti Bhadi Priya. Now, while it is said Asti Bhadi Priya, which are Asti and Bhati are very high concepts. Priya we can understand. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Yajnavalkya keeps saying, I love my wife because I love the Brahman. So, Priya. So, anything that is Priya. Now, Priya is mostly a concept of the heart. So, instead of Asti Bhadi Priya, I think for most people, there may be very highly advanced people, that's okay. But most people like me, I don't know about you, I think it's good to start instead of Asti Bhadi Priya, from Priya, Bhadi and Asti. So Priya is something we can understand. Even two college students in love know what Priya is. They don't even have to understand philosophy. And for that Priyata, they are ready even to commit suicide, end their own lives. So what 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 I'm trying to say is that while I agree that there is only one, till we touch that, it is good to be two. Guru Nanak once said, I prefer to be the ant that licks the sugar than become the sugar.
Yeah, Basta.
Sir, now it is time for us to
Yeah, yes.
to part for the time being. We'll meet again.
Yes, Swamiji. Yes, so nice of you, Swamiji.
Not at all. I would,
And
I would like to say two words.
sir.
Madhukaranath Swamiji. I was introduced to you by great soul Justice Sri M. Venkatachalaya ji.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, M. Venkatachalaya.
I also respect him very much.
Yeah,
He has
he
come and
respects
stayed.
you a lot. He loves you. He respects you a lot. And he says, I have seen only a few people, whom I can count on my fingers. Great souls that I've seen in my life. He says that Sri Yam is one such personality. So so I have also somehow got an opportunity to participate a few hours in your Padayatra towards Kashmir.
Yes. Now I remember. So nice to see you, sir. धन्यवाद. नमस्कार. Om Shanti. Om Shanti.